canceling class. So we are going to talk about op-eds today. Are you all familiar with an op-ed? So this is a section of the newspaper where people write their opinions. They're in most papers. Anyone, like you guys could go write an op-ed and submit it to the paper. You don't have to be a journalist. Journalists do write them, but an op-ed is always going to take kind of a strong opinion. So I want us to, this one is from Herald Leader, the local paper here. I might have to go to a private browser because I don't pay for it. Okay, good. But there's a recording of it, so we're going to try to listen to the recording, and I'll scroll down so you guys can follow along. And what I want us to do, similar to what we did with the fable on Wednesday, I want us to pay attention to the structure of this, the rhetorical tools the author is using to persuade us of her point, and then we're going to kind of break it down and talk about it. So just note anything that you guys notice about the way she makes her argument. So the title, New Traffic Fatality Numbers Demonstrate a National Crisis. We Must Act Now. So this was published 2 days ago. Alex Ott.
New traffic fatality numbers demonstrate a national crisis. We must act now. I was run over by a drunk driver and almost didn't survive. When I was 13, I was on a jet ski on a lake near my home here in Kentucky when a boat driven by a drunken operator going over 60 miles an hour hit me from the side, throwing me off the jet ski. I landed face down in the water. The boat went over the jet ski and landed on top of my body. The impact broke my neck, collarbone and femurs, shattered my jaw, lacerated my liver, and left me with a severe traumatic brain injury. I was in a coma for a week. When I awoke, I discovered my right leg was severed below the knee. As devastating as that experience was, I am only one of the approximately 300,000 people injured in a drunk driving crash each year in the U.S. Tragically, traffic fatality numbers are rising. There is a public safety crisis on our roads. Traffic deaths are up for the third consecutive year. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, NHTSA, just released an estimate that 9,560 people were killed in traffic crashes in the first quarter of 2022, a 7% increase over the first quarter of 2021, and the worst first quarter in 20 years, indicating that lives taken by someone's choice to drive impaired will reach the highest levels in over a decade. Just a quick word from our sponsor.
I didn't listen to the recording last night, so I'm sorry, I didn't know it had all this.
Join users around the world and compete for the top spot. Test your tech quotient knowledge on science, technology, engineering, and math questions. How many rounds can you complete before losing all your lives? Earn badges to show off your gray matter as questions increase in difficulty. Got what it takes to triumph overall? Let the ultimate head game begin. Download Tech Quotient from your favorite app store today.
It's even worse in Kentucky, where NHTSA estimates a 27.2% increase in traffic fatalities during that same time period. The 7% national increase estimate in the first quarter of 2022 is in addition to the estimated 10.5% increase in overall traffic deaths in 2021 compared to 2020. Those aren't just statistics. They're people. They're family members, friends, loved ones who aren't coming home. One life lost or person injured would be too many. 9,560 people killed in one quarter is unthinkable. Hazardous driving behaviors such as speeding, reckless, and impaired driving that got worse during the pandemic are largely to blame for the increases. It's time to respond with proven-to-work strategies, particularly fair and equitable traffic enforcement aimed directly at stopping hazardous driving. A May 2022 NHTSA synthesis of studies concluded that high-visibility enforcement efforts targeting alcohol-impaired driving reduced crashes or prohibited behavior in 58% of the 90 study locations. It also noted that, for preventing alcohol-impaired driving, publicized sobriety checkpoints and high-visibility saturation patrols have demonstrated effectiveness. Another successful model is the annual Click It or Ticket program, which has used good laws, education, and enforcement to achieve a national seatbelt use rate of 90%, saving thousands of lives a year. We need to refocus on programs and activities that worked a decade ago when on average 10,000 fewer lives were lost on U.S. roadways annually. In parallel, work must continue toward eliminating drunk driving. Thanks to the support of Mothers Against Drunk Driving, MADD, its allies, and victims and survivors of this crime, courageous bipartisan leaders in Congress included an advanced impaired driving prevention technology mandate in the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, which was signed into law last November. It requires new equipment in cars by 2027 that will eventually save more than 9,000 lives a year. The infrastructure law also provided additional resources to be used nationally and at the state and local level for a safe systems approach to safety, part of the U.S. Department of Transportation's National Roadway Safety Strategy that includes roadway engineering improvements that over time will complement re-emphasis on human behavior changes and safer vehicles to reduce fatalities and injuries. All these long-term steps are essential, but there's no time to lose. Fair and equitable enforcement of life-saving traffic safety laws should be our top priority.
Cool. So, what do you guys think? Did you find this to be persuasive? A couple people nodding yes. So let's break it
Next
down.
article.
Oh.
Despite what Republicans wanted to,
Alright. What? We're gonna break this down kind of into its elements. So what is the exigence of this op-ed? Yeah,
Drunk driving.
drunk
Or
driving.
like trying to stop.
Yeah, how do we stop? We stop people from being, I'm gonna even put being killed by drunk drivers, or reckless drivers. Is this a fruitful question? How so?
How?
Using the word how, right? It's different than asking, is drunk driving bad? So this would be, if Alex was working the way that we're working in this class and starting with a question she wanted to research, this would be her research question, right? Her exigence. So who is the audience of this piece? Remembering it's Herald Leader, Lexington paper. Yeah.
Older demographics,
What was it?
the older demographics.
Older demographic, yeah, and so the, and you say that because
Because I don't think younger generations will be reading newspapers.
yeah, good. So from it being in the newspaper, we can think older demo. What else? It's specific to Kentucky, right? You know, she talks about there's a 7% increase nationwide in fatalities and a 27% increase in our state. That's pretty significant. And this is a local paper. It's not likely going to be read by people outside of this city or this state. So, like, if the New York Times posts this op-ed, do you think they would have specific stats just for Kentucky? Maybe if we were like the worst state in the country, but that you can see that it's specific to this region too. All right, who is the rhetor?
What do we got? Amos the Rhetorical.
Yeah, that was just a recording. So the writer is actually the girl that was pictured in there. But that's confusing because I had that very bad reading. So her name is Alex. What does she tell us about herself? Yeah, Brian.
She was a victim.
Yeah, so victim of a reckless driving accident. And what are the constraints of writing an op-ed? Yeah, Lori.
I was gonna say it can be biased.
Biased? Yep. Biased because it's an opinion, is what you're thinking. And that can also, a constraint doesn't necessarily have to be like a bad thing. I know it sounds like a bad word, but the fact that you can be very forward with your opinion in an op-ed versus just like a newspaper article where you're supposed to be more neutral as a journalist, that can be a strength. But it is a constraint with the form of an op-ed. Good. Anything else? Brian touched a little bit on it being in a newspaper. So one constraint of a newspaper is you have to pay for it. Like I only get, you get like one free article that you click on. I clicked on this once on my laptop. If I tried to read something else on my laptop, I would have to pay to subscribe. So paywall, having a paywall or publishing in something that people have to pay, that's a constraint that's going to limit who you reach, right? Any other constraints you guys can think of?
Well, it would be because it's only in Lexington.
Yep, so being local paper, local small paper. What about like the climate of where she's publishing this? What do you all think about that? Like, do you think she's up against some odds? I mean, yeah, no?
Because I feel like she's trying to speak to the audience a lot, so I feel like, I don't know, I just feel like whoever she's speaking to, they're gonna listen. So
Yeah.
I don't think she has any loss.
Perfect. Yeah. And do you all feel like this article, like, we're just thinking, there's no right or wrong answer, but like if someone were to be writing an op-ed that they're like, pro-choice and like, that would maybe be more difficult. Do you all agree? Maybe not in Lexington, like Lexington's pretty liberal leaning, but yeah, just thinking about like the political climate of like what it would mean to publish. Maybe not this article because I think no one wants people to get killed by drunk drivers, but I do think that there's a strong alcohol lobbying community in Kentucky with the bourbon industry. So maybe, because have you all seen like the breathalyzers in your car that you have to blow in to start? Like, if she had maybe called to put one of those in every single car, do you think that would make her argument? Like, do you think more people would be against that, or do you think people would support that? Because that seems like a solution to me. Don't let the car start if someone's been drinking. And we have the technology to do so. Like, I'm just thinking about it. And there's a big reason. Like I told you all, I used to write for like a cannabis magazine, and that's like a big reason that, marijuana won't be legalized here is, or is taking so long to be legalized here, is the bourbon industry, and the alcohol industry has a lot of power in this state. So those are just things to think about regional. This is good. Anything you all want to add to any of these categories? And then I want to erase them and talk about the structure and some other terms. Good. Let me put this back up, and I want us to write down the way Alex moves through her argument. And then I also want to talk about how she's, so this is the logos component, the structure of the article. But then I also want to, after this, talk about how she uses ethos and pathos to make her argument. All right, so structure. How does she introduce this? What? Yeah, Jack.
It's a personal story.
Personal story, good. What do you all think about that first sentence? Does it make you want to read more? Yeah, she really hooks the reader with that first sentence. Your first sentences are very important for whether someone's going to read your argument or not. So I really want you all to pay attention to that. And yes, she opens with her personal connection, which I can only speak for myself, but that made me want to read this op-ed more. It made me want to listen to this writer. So that's using ethos, right? Her credibility. She has experienced what it's like to have her life kind of turned upside down by this issue. Great. Yeah, there's a picture of her, the writer. All right, so personal right. What's happening in this paragraph?
She's helping you realize how serious it.
Yeah, Lord.
I was gonna say it's like a thesis.
Uh,
Like a, I don't know.
yeah, Ava?
She's kind of giving like a background of like what happened to her, but also happens to other people. So she's giving like a statistic of how many people it happens to.
Yeah. So moving into statistic from personal, connecting her story to the larger picture, right? In that, I'm not saying that Jack or Lauren, either of your answers were wrong, they're all right. But just really looking at these tools. Because what I want us to do from this is to make a model that you guys can take and use for your own paper. I'm just trying to give you different examples of things that you can imitate. Great. So this is, well, let's look at this paragraph. I would kind of group these together. What's she doing here?
Background.
Yep. And it's facts, right? Moving right into her. That's why I put that quote up on the beginning. You can have your own opinion, but you can't have your own facts. These are all things that we can look up. Statistics, facts. So using facts, statistics to back up your argument. And then we have this paragraph here. What's she doing there? What's she appealing to if we're thinking ethos, pathos, logos? Pathos, emotion, right? She's talking about facts and then bringing it into these are people, appealing to the emotion. So connecting statistics. To pathos, which means emotion. Painting a picture. Something if I wrote this, I would go even farther and tell a few quick anecdotes of stories of other people that have died from drunk driving in our state. So I would write, they aren't just statistics, they're people. There's blah, 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 who was a father of blah, blah, blah. And there's da-da-da, who was a 5-year-old child. There's, like, I would do, like, maybe a list of 3 of, like, people that I knew, not that I knew personally, but people that I could find that had been victims of this. Great. So what is she doing here? This kind of section. Yeah.
I feel like she's showing more statistics, but also starting to get into like what that we should do, what
Good.
we should do to help them out.
Yep. Still using statistics, that's important, but moving into solutions. And these statistics are showing that solutions work. So stats support efficacy of solutions. What about this section? Kind of continuing in here, right? Solutions, here's what we need to do. So this is her conclusion, right? She's concluding on a call to action. All these long-term steps are essential, but there's no time to lose. Fair and equitable enforcement of life-saving traffic safety laws should be our top priority. Anything that you guys want to add to this structure of how this worked? Or anything I didn't cover as far as how she's using her ethos, pathos, or logos, the structure, to make her argument. So I was gonna have us try to fit this into one of the progymnasmata exercises. So these are kind of old, like they're written in ancient Greece, so people weren't writing op-eds, so there's not one for that. And I was gonna have us look at those and try to like see which of the 14 it fit more closely in. But I think that this was probably the most helpful, and that's not really necessary. So 9:26, what I want us to do for 10 minutes is I want you all to take this structure and like outline, think of one of your research questions. You don't have to write an op-ed, but kind of outline how you would use this structure to answer that question, kind of state your opinion on that question. So let me pull a question from my other class just to give, because I really can't think of any examples right now. And I'll kind of try to explain more what I'm looking for. And this is not going to be something you're going to turn in, but I do think this, like, after you do the upcoming major assignment, you will have to do an outline. So if this is a form you liked, if it's a form that seems to be working for your information, then this is something you could ultimately use for your outline. So let me see. I'm going to pick a random student from my other section and look at his 3 questions and speculate how he could do this. So this student is writing about the community of Tijuana, and he wants to know why crime has increased in the last few years. So this particular student is from Mexico, and he still has a lot of family there. So he could really start with a personal story of growing up. He has really fond memories of Tijuana, and that was like where his family like went on their beach vacations. And it's like a really good place in his memory. So he could kind of start there, and then he could move into, but today, here's what the cartel's doing, here's how the crime rates are. Really get some numbers. And for here, like for your all's own assignment, you can look up some statistics or just write statistics that you think would help your argument. For him, an argument might be how many people did the cartel kill last year? What is the rate of violent crime per capita? Like, just list some statistics you think could work in your argument. And then, he could connect it back to his family or to anyone living there. And then here he would go in for looking some of what people are doing to lower crime in Tijuana. Write some of those solutions, how effective they are, suggest ones that he thinks are useful, and then end with his call to action on how he thinks the government should proceed. Does that make sense for you all to do with one of your research questions? Just an outline? Okay. So it's 9:30, let's take 10 minutes to do that, and then I'll put the homework up on the board as usual, and then we'll go. As always, raise your hand if you need help, or bring your computer up here. And you're not turning this in, it's just for you to potentially use as an outline. So if you have something else you need to do, I understand. But I do think this is a good form that all of you could use to write a really effective research paper.